Welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. My name is Councillor Jackie Chellin and I'm Vice Chair of the committee. The meeting is being streamed live to the Cheltenham Borough Council YouTube channel. Please note a fire alarm test isn't expected, so if the fire alarm does sound, please make your way to the nearest fire exit. And we have apologies today. We have apologies from Councillor Joy and welcome to Councillor Foster, who's attending as a substitute. We also have apologies from Councillor Allen and Councillor Healy. Welcome to your first Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And we've had last-minute apologies from Councillor Smith, who was here but who has had to... Oh, and Councillor Garcia Clamp. Okay, thank you. Okay, right, that's all sorted. Could I ask for any declarations of interest? So any members to state any interests they may have in items on the agenda? Okay, lovely, thank you. Could we please go to the minutes of the last meeting? That's the meeting held on the 31st of March. And any issues to raise on those minutes? So could I move that members approve the minutes of the meeting, those of you who were here, the minutes of the meeting held on the 31st of March? Okay, thank you very much. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So the next item on the agenda is public and member questions and calls for actions and petitions, but none has been received. So we'll move on to the cabinet briefing. So thank you, Councillor Hay, and we'll invite you to say what you'd like to say.
Okay, sorry, should have done that before. So actually, it'll be really brief. We only had council last week, so I pretty much updated council on anything that needed to be said at the time. But I'm happy if any members have got particular questions. I'll do my best.
No questions at this point? Okay, thank you very much. Now, matters referred to the committee, there's none again. So what we'll go to now is the feedback from other scrutiny meetings attended. There haven't been any other scrutiny meetings, partly because I think of the elections. And we have no updates from other scrutiny task groups. So in that case, it means we zip on to Richard Gibson's item, physical activity and sports strategy for Cheltenham, the draft action plan. So thank you, Richard. I'll give you the chance to introduce it and answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. You'll notice I'm joined by Councillor Isaac Tailford, who is the new Cabinet member. I think you've only been in post, I think you can count them on the fingers of one hand in terms of the days Councillor Tailford has taken over the portfolio that's relevant sports and physical activity. But Isaac will be taking this report to Cabinet tomorrow, so I think it's useful that he's been able to join us tonight to review the discussion and also to feed back to Cabinet if there are any issues arising. I'll just give you a bit of background and then I'll pass it over to you. So I think it's worthwhile reminding ourselves about where we started or why we started the process of collating the sport and physical activity strategy. There are a number of reasons. I mean, primarily, looking at our own sporting and physical activity infrastructure, particularly, say, leisure at Prince of Wales Stadium, they are requiring investment. And I think having a strategy, a broad strategy, helps us in that process of determining the best future for those buildings. So we have an immediate need there. But I think we've got communities with ambitions to do more around sport and physical activity. In the recent years, we've seen Leckhampton Rovers come forward with their ambitious plans, which have now been realised for the boroughs. But obviously, we've been working closely with other community organisations, for instance, Cheltenham Saracens, who have plans for the Petersfield area as well. But that's set within the context of health inequalities, and you as local councillors will be aware that not all our communities enjoy robust health, and we are aware that some of our communities do suffer from those inequalities, and sport and physical activity are important tools to address some of those inequalities. So that's another reason why. And on a similar theme, we were aware when we started the work to draft the strategy around some of those inequalities in terms of how much sport and physical activity infrastructure is in our priority communities as well. And that's the physical bits that support communities be active, but also the community infrastructure. I think at the time, although the situation may have changed in terms of the number of youth football teams representing the west of Cheltenham, there weren't that many compared to those youth football teams in the more affluent parts of the town, compared to Leckhampton Rovers, Charlton Kings Rovers, etc. They are awash with football clubs, and I think there weren't the same opportunities for those young people growing up in the west of the town. I know we've got a couple of ward councillors representing the west of the town, and you may have opinions on that. But then also, in terms of the rationale for the strategy, it's around supporting wider growth ambitions. We've all got ambitions around Golden Valley, so the link in making sure that Cheltenham is perceived as a healthy place to be and a healthy place to invest in was another rationale. But also, finally, it was included in our corporate plan 23-27 as a key kind of corporate project. So the report sets out the journey that we've been on in terms of those four reports to Cabinet this started in July 23 with the initial vision and outcomes, which set the framework for this work. We then went on to commission 2 very detailed studies, both in terms of the built facilities that support physical activity in our communities and also the playing pitches. Both reports run probably 80, 100 pages. So, hopefully you've all read them in detail. Happy to answer questions on those, but they provide a very robust evidence base for the future. And those have both been summarised in reports to Cabinet. But we've also more recently had the report that we took in February around engagement with young people about their hopes and ambitions for sport and physical activity in their communities. So I think we've got a really strong basis for the action plan and a really strong basis to move forward. And the action plan has been drafted in such a way it can stand alone as a standalone document that is accessible, or you can read it within the context of those more detailed studies. The action plan has been drafted with Isaac's predecessor very much, supporting that strategy and our response to the action plan. It's been drafted, to reflect that political ambition, but also mindful, I guess, from our perspective in terms of what can actually be delivered in terms of capacity and resources. And again, you may want to have comments on that. So it's going to Cabinet tomorrow, hopefully for sign-off. There are some key actions in there which we know are going to be very important, particularly around the engagement of stakeholders and how we involve more people in delivering this. There are so many key players, I don't use that term in terms of football players, but partners that we need to engage with. You will know about how important, for instance, schools are in terms of their support, in terms of, the number of swimming pools that we've got, sports halls, playing pitches that are delivered and managed by local schools. So it's really important that we engage with schools. We've got a wide plethora of sporting clubs and organisations that are so critical to deliver that ambition. So it's how we work and interact with those. So I think one of those key kind of actions that we need to take away is about how we continue to engage. And then there are, you know, the investment plans. And you will know we're not, as a council, awash with cash. And if Gemma was here, she'd probably tell us that story. But it's how we unlock investment through creative means. So it's not falling on the borough council to deliver that ambition, but it's how we work creatively with others, particularly potentially sort of developers through the strategic allocation sites of North West Cheltenham and West Cheltenham. So I'm probably going to leave it there. I'm not going to go through the action plan in detail, but I just thought that context was going to be important to inform the discussion.
Thanks very much, Richard. And yeah, it's really, really comprehensive and it's really helpful, all the papers put together, really fantastic picture. So I'll throw it open to our councillors for questions and comments. Councillor Chandler.
Yeah, thank you. Very, very comprehensive report. I've just got a couple of comments, really. One is about the football, because it's heavily weighted towards football to some extent, isn't it? And we do know that that's what everybody wants to play. But I think there needs to be a bit of the park left for everybody else, and that's not happening in all of them. You know, some of them have got 4 football matches going on, and it's impossible for anybody else to use it at the weekend. So that's something to consider. The other thing that I've read about recently is schools selling off playing fields. So I guess you'll be monitoring that and seeing what goes on. And my last thing is, much as I love lacrosse and was delighted to see it at the end of the thing, I don't see any netball in there, which is a game that lots of girls play at school and they want to continue playing. So I just thought that was another consideration. But thank you for a comprehensive report.
Do you want to respond, Richard?
Yeah, football is an interesting sport, and you know, there are so many opportunities with football because it is so well resourced. It brings in a lot of investment through the Football Foundation. Hundreds of millions of pounds are going into improving football infrastructure across the country because of the TV rights deals. And it's really observant that you've picked that up, that there is a risk that football dominates to the exclusion of other sports. And we've seen particularly how hockey has been marginalised because the artificial pitches that were put down originally for hockey, which are these sort of sand-based, you know, the smooth artificial pitches, just get taken over by football and they get marginalised and pushed out of the way. So it's a real balancing act, and I think that's something that the council, you all collectively, are going to have to oversee, that the attractive investment from football doesn't marginalise other sports. And you mentioned netball, you know, that's another sport that could potentially get marginalised as we potentially, you know, attracting more investment from football. I think the Football Foundation are keen that where investment is made, particularly around these 3G pitches, the pitches that have a bit more of a look and feel to grass, that they are used for multi-sports. But again, it really is only rugby that can be played on those sort of pitches. I think then, you know, conversations on that theme, conversations we've had with Councillor Pinniger around just general community access, that we should not be giving over parks and valuable open spaces to sport and potentially at risk excluding community use. And I think we've captured an action in that about how we work with friends of groups to ensure that their ambitions are realised. And then, yes, schools selling off playing pitches was certainly a risk going back a few years. There is less of a risk now because Sport England are all over this and will raise, at the moment, they can raise a statutory objection, although the government are currently looking at that in terms of, you know, their review of planning. What I will say, the recent example of that was Pittville, and I think that was set against, there was, you know, they have in effect sold off playing fields, but these were unused, but in return they are getting a much needed sports hall, and Pittville were the only school in the area which did not have a sports hall, and it was very unusual for a school of that size not to have a sports hall. So there has been a trade-off there in terms of sports pitches versus a sports hall. So hopefully that answers those.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor Day?
Thank you. And, thank you very much, Richard, for the report. And I know in the report and in all my interactions with you, your passion, for the area really does come across. I'm wondering, well, I've got a few points or questions. I wonder actually, in terms of the council's budget or your budget, how much money we actually kind of have to spend over the next 12 months, let's say, because reading the report, what came across to me is really how reliant we are on raising money from elsewhere, than our own resources, wherever that might be. And really, as a result, a lot of the objectives appeared to be kind of just being realistic, medium term to long term. And I'm just wondering how much, kind of action, how much additional activity can we drive, say, over the next 12 months? And that kind of leads me, I suppose, onto my slight pitch. Something to think about is can we, at a relatively modest cost, leverage off existing facilities that are, as well as schools that are privately owned. And, from a personal point of view, I was very pleased to see bouldering mentioned a couple of times. Full disclosure, I'm a member at 270 Climbing Centre, so not boulders in Cheltenham. But I know from my own experience that that's an incredibly positive and actually relatively cheap, form of sport or exercise. And the boulders, which is a business, in Cheltenham, is actually in, as I'm sure you know, an area, of low income, multiple deprivation. And I'm just wondering, just using that as an example, but I'm sure there are many others in the town, whether the council, for a relatively modest cost, could do deals with those sorts of facilities. Maybe they're already in place in the Feel Good Pass and the Youth Activity Pass that you mentioned, because I've just seen with my own eyes, how positive that is. And to me, it's that Boulders is just in the perfect location. And the other thing is, I know at our last meeting, we had a discussion at the end about toxic masculinity. And I think with that activity, and I'm sure others, I've seen it as really a tremendous antidote to that kind of mentality that is creeping into society. So I can honestly say I've never seen any toxic masculinity happening in that environment. And in fact, of the really strongest, climbers I've seen, teenage girls are disproportionately, in that number. They really are, the group that we all look up to. So there's quite a lot there, but I just wonder if you could maybe enlarge on that section of the report.
Thank you, Councillor Day. I don't want to stray too far into budgets because it's not really my remit. I think the exciting thing is hopefully tomorrow Cabinet will endorse the Sports Action Plan, and I think that is very much there, creates that framework for the business as usual budgets that we have. So and Councillor Telford will know this because it was in the previous around the playing picture, the Green Spaces team, and making sure that our business as usual is supporting the ambitions. I think it is difficult at the moment around additional investment from CBC into delivering this, and that's why we've couched the terms of the action plans in those kind of terms of using that as a basis to lever in external funding wherever possible. And I do think having that strategy and action plan gives us that opportunity to go to the Football Foundation, for instance, more football pitches, more football investment, but also, the rugby union, netball. It gives us that opportunity and also leverage with schools as well. I didn't quite know where you were going in terms of bouldering about leveraging in. I was thinking, maybe thinking about use of our own buildings for bouldering centres. Maybe, this building, But yes, I agree entirely about how we use those programmes that we are committed to, like the Feel Good Pass. At the moment, that is more aimed at community providers, and we haven't expanded that to look at commercial providers. But there is that recent investment from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund into the No Child Left Behind Youth Activity Pass, which we will be looking to bring on commercial providers into that mix. We've just got to scope it out and work out what the deals are that we can negotiate. But we hope that by getting commercial providers on board, we can give them publicity, linkages, an opportunity to showcase what they've got to that broader market and be part of something quite special. So I wouldn't want to give you any sort of definitive guarantees that we can get commercial providers on board, but that certainly is the intent with that No Child Left Behind activity pass. And whether we can do that for the Feel Good Pass as well is something that we would like to explore within the budgets that we have. And I suppose I would then go back to talk about engagement, that getting stakeholders together. We are aware that there's a wide range of private operators coming in because they will see a commercial market. And we've had that recently with paddle, haven't we? That at one point we were there thinking, well, what's the role for the local authority in meeting that need for paddle? But all of a sudden we have all these private operators coming in, wanting to create those opportunities and provide that themselves. Well, that's fantastic. There is a risk, I suppose, that private operators may be charging too much, but at the end of the day, the market seemed to come in and solve that particular demand. And I guess that is also where potentially bouldering climbing is as well. So great that private operators are recognising a need and coming up with solutions. Our role, I guess, as the public sector is looking at, are those opportunities then for our less well-off? Or, can all communities benefit from that? And is there an intervention model that we could potentially put in place to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to benefit within available resources?
Just to, I guess, clarify kind of one of my points, which I don't think I really made, is for me the advantage of some kind of arrangement with a private provider, but it is that I can just see with my budget scrutiny hat on that money is tight, and I can just see so easily where we never get into the position where we have this amount of money for the capital investment and the maintenance and everything else on top. However, if you have an arrangement with a private provider, they've already done all the capex. They are responsible for all the maintenance. So from the council's point of view, the cost is incredibly controllable and is really just a pure revenue usage cost. And I just think by really looking for those opportunities, you can actually unlock a lot more activity, certainly faster, because those costs are being shared amongst a huge number of people, than having things that we would love to do, but we never actually get the money to do them because, it is a lot of money to set up a facility from scratch and then know you can maintain it and run it. So sorry, that was one of the points I wanted to make.
And then I think your final point around toxic masculinity, sport is a great leveler. And I'm really pleased that the national governing bodies for sport are all over this and making sure that any investment they're making to sport, whether that's football, rugby, or I would say netball, but because that doesn't have accused of toxic masculinity, or making sure that equal opportunities are there and very much investment going into the women and girls side of sport. And that is a great leveller, and that will help address those balances.
Thanks, Richard. Councillor Pinniger?
So, as you know, I think I've had 2 or 3 meetings with you, Richard, about pitches strategy and the activity strategy, and I'm happy that all of the things we discussed are in there. And my colleagues have raised the 2 points that I had, and Chris put it so much better than me. I was wanting, what would the schedule be for this? These are the plan items, but it could go off into the future indefinitely. You know, that the schedule seemed important, but looking at it from the budget point of view is probably the most sensible way. And then the other thing was the netball. I've had feedback that netball is in fact the most popular women's sport, and if we can't find investment for that, then we're really, you know, we're really skewing it towards men, because although there are women's football teams, they're few and far between compared with the men's ones. So those are my 2 comments.
Thanks, Richard. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think in terms of the schedule, I probably need to sit down with the councillor next to me and work out, you know, from the political side, what the priorities are. It's not for me to determine that. Within the action plan, we've got an indications of what might be short term, medium term, longer term. But I think it's up for Councillor Telford, once he's digested all of this and been to Cabinet, you know, to reflect on, from his perspective, what's going to be a priority, and also what can be accompanied with potential resources to make that happen. And I think we'll take it away. You know, we've heard, you know, 2 mentions of netball now about how it's important it is, and we probably need to reflect on what's in those studies. I need to go back and read the relevant chapter in the built facilities strategy, what that was saying, what the recommendations are for us in terms of netball, because we do want to support all sports. And if you're telling us that netball is the most appealing sport to women and girls, then, and again, what is being mopped up and what is being provided by either schools or the netball club, and there are some really proactive netball clubs operating in the area, aren't there? I can't remember their name. Sevenside, something like that. I don't know why I'm looking at you, Councillor Day.
Yeah. Seven Stars has been taken over by the Birmingham Panthers.
Oh, right. Because I thought we had a Premiership club operating in the area.
We did.
Yeah, we did. Oh, they've been taken. Sorry.
Sorry,
useful
my daughter's a massive netball fan.
Yeah. Well, that goes to show the ebb and flow of netball teams. But if it's how we work to support ambition within sport.
I don't have my card, but I just want to say it does have a section on netball. It's a small section, but towards the end, mentioning obviously to protect any of the netball courts we have. And one of the benefits, it's worth saying, of the football investment is that a lot of courts and spaces are being used up by football at the moment, as I said earlier with hockey, that shouldn't be, because there's nowhere else for the football to go, and obviously that makes the most money for these places. So if you get football onto other pitches and get that investment from the FA, etc., who have a lot of money because of football, you can free up those other spaces for hockey and for netball and those other sports that at the moment get squashed by football.
Thank you very much. But I think you'll have to keep Councillor Tailford in tow, because he's a very big football player.
I think the other point I'd make on the schedule is about what you want to do as a committee going forward and how you keep the progress of the action plan under review. You know, that's the ball's in your court, so to say.
I think we've got 2 more questions. So there's Councillor Healy and then Councillor Foster. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the paper, Richard, and thank you for all the great work you're doing on this. It's lovely to meet you. For me, this kind of talks about a sort of holistic view of activities that are going on in Cheltenham. And that's really wonderful and really positive, and it's great that there is so much going on in our town. For me, the piece that feels like it's missing is a kind of comms campaign to explain all of that to all of our residents. And that might help with some of the pieces that Councillor Day was talking about in terms of how we get our commercial partners to buy more into the town and advertise the facilities that they can offer to people. But also where you do have more facilities in affluent areas, how you can advertise to people who perhaps don't live in those areas that they can still use those facilities and get the most out of them. Something like a Let's Get Cheltenham Active campaign or something like that, that's not just also focused just solely on sport, but also on well-being. We've got our beautiful parks. We've now got our fantastic cycle path that's coming into a lot of the town. Feels like it's a good opportunity to start to really harness all of those good things that are happening and advertise them as part of a wider vehicle. I don't know if that's possible, but just a suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor Healy. Yeah, fantastic. I think that would be amazing. I think I am just nervous of resources and how we would deliver that. But again, I would defer, I guess, a little bit to the Councillor Tailford, because I think that is something that would require a little bit of, because you're talking about design of material and then pushing it. Well, you need to have the rationale for the campaign, and then pulling it together, designing it, pushing it, and it may just have some costs. So, but I think it's a fabulous idea.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm happy to take that away and have a chat behind the scenes once my feet are more under the table. Because I think, obviously, the more we can do to get people active, the better. Even if it is on a small level comm stuff on the social media and all of those kind of things, what can be done to improve that and get more people out there, I think should be encouraged, especially as you say with Parks and Gardens having just come from that. Lots of people are using that, and that's one of people's favourite bits about living in Cheltenham. So the more you can encourage that, the better.
And I think we've got examples across Cheltenham of things like walking groups, where anyone, doesn't matter how fit you are, but you can still join up a walking group and go for a stroll. And we know just how amazing walking is at keeping people's health and helping them with their health improvement.
I think this will be the last question, I think, if that's all right. Councillor Foster, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not on. You put it on, have you? Yeah. As the top way to keep active, but I couldn't find anything in the report about encouraging walking. And I know that it's a very complicated issue, walking and cycling, because frankly, sometimes it's not very pleasant walking in town with the air quality, with the bad quality of the pavements and things like that. So I was very glad to hear you mention it then. And linked to walking slightly, in the demographic data that you looked at, there seemed to be nothing about more elderly people, people over 70, say, who still want to be active. And I just wondered if you had thought about what stakeholders you could engage with to make sure that the more elderly people stay active in the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. When we were preparing the strategy, we sort of deliberately did not kind of include cycling because we were very aware that cycling, although it's really important for keeping people active, and we saw that in some of the stats, it just risked opening up a whole can of worms around infrastructure, and one that is quite complex and requires significant investment. So we shied away from referencing cycling, not from a desire. Many of us are keen cyclists in the room. And I think walking is slightly different, though, because it doesn't need expensive infrastructure to make that happen. And we are blessed with a number of community organisations that do promote community walking. And in fact, I've got a meeting on Wednesday with an organisation called Active Gloucestershire. Sorry, I'll have to address you up the screen, which is the County Activity Partnership, who are very interested on both themes that you mentioned around, they want to get more investment into community walking projects. So there is potential for something there, and we're very keen to meet with them and understand what they can offer. But also around the older generation as well, about how we ensure that older people remain physically active. You might be aware that there is investment going into Fit for Life classes across Cheltenham. These are strength and balance classes. We work through something called Cheltenham Integrated Locality Partnership, the Cheltenham ILP, which is the coming together of the NHS and community partners and the Borough Council and the County Council. And one of their 3 priorities is how we keep people active for longer, because we all probably understand the more you keep them active, the less likely they're going to slip, that they're going to slip, trip, fall, end up with a broken hip, end up in hospital with severe health issues. So there is small scale investment going into those strength and balance classes across Cheltenham, and we would love to do more. But there is going to be an active ageing open day, I think, in June, that I'm happy to share more information about that. But it is a key, it's not necessarily reflected as a key priority in here, although it's probably referenced, but a key priority for our health partners, how we keep older people active. So we just need to do that.
Thank you.
Cross-linking.
Thank you very much. I think we've had one more question. Councillor Beale.
Hi, Richard. Just like to raise, it's probably something you're very aware of, but the Prince of Wales Stadium and the Cheltenham Harriers, I've met with them a couple of times, and clearly there's a significant amount of investment required in order to keep that track going so they can have competitive races. When I looked at some of the numbers, I was thinking there are a lot of people not from just in Gloucestershire, but in surrounding counties. And what I'm wondering is, forgive me, I haven't read the full report, but is there an opportunity for gathering funding from surrounding counties to support that athletics function within the west of Cheltenham?
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you for the work you do with Cheltenham Harriers. I believe that they're the biggest athletic club in the southwest, or they're a really significant part of what we do as a town. Yes, Prince of Wales needs a new track. Later figures were around £500,000 to do that, so it's not a cheap solution. And Harriers and other running clubs can use the track, just not for competitive licensed events, which is a bit of a shame, because I think they're having to take that. In the report, we identified that Prince of Wales has regional significance, and I think we framed it exactly as that potentially we should be looking at regional contributions, strategic SIL contributions, because the investment that requires should not just be falling on little old Cheltenham Borough Council to do that. Sadly, England athletics, UK athletics is one of those sports that is just not invested in or has access. If this was football, it would be a different kettle of fish altogether. But England athletics, as you probably well know, are just not able to find the amount of funding, because ideally we should be going to them and saying, well, you put some money in. I think I'm very keen, when Councillor Tayfield gets his feet under the desk to potentially join with you and meet with Harriers, because I think that's important, that relationship. I know Councillor Horwood had met with Harriers, but also with Smith's Rugby Club as well, who are another important tenant at Prince of Wales Stadium. And I think the more that we've got that joint meetings going on, working on the communications between the Trust, Harriers, Smiths, the more that we can, not necessarily resolve the financial challenge, but at least understand where each of the partners are and what we can do collectively together.
Thank you very much. I think we've had a really good and wide-ranging discussion there and kept Richard on his toes. You need a glass of water needed now, yes. Nice and active. If there aren't any other comments or questions, or if you don't want to say anything else, Richard, we'll just wish you well with the paper tomorrow at Cabinet, and yeah, look forward to what transpires. Okay. Thank you very much. So we've got one other a major item on the agenda, which is a briefing note about accessibility and equality, diversity and inclusion. And this has been a lot of work by a lot of people pulling this together, and we're really pleased to see it here tonight and to have Claire Hughes here to present it to us. So I'll leave you to it, and then we'll take it from there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Challen. Yeah, so this briefing note really has come forward. It was something that Councillor Took actually sort of instigated quite some time ago, actually now, about trying to pull together all the work we do across the organisation around accessibility in particular. So, you know, what do we do for our customers that have got disabilities, whether that's, you know, whether they're a wheelchair user, whether they've got a sight impairment, whether they've got a hearing impairment. So what are all the things that we do to try and assist and make sure that those people have got equal access to our services? So it's taken quite some time to pull all of this together. The report is quite long, but hopefully the sort of little contents bit at the front helped a little bit with understanding how it kind of flowed, because problem is when you've got lots of people pulling lots of information together, it can sometimes look a little bit like Frankenstein's monster, can't it? So hopefully it sort of flowed through okay. So we've gone through sort of some of the services, so customer services, for example, democratic services, what we're doing around comms, so around our website and that, for example, what we're doing in our communities team, and then some of our regulatory functions, so licensing, planning, some what we do around environmental stuff, so how we work with UBICO on things like assisted collections. And then there's a section around our buildings and assets, so how do we keep access to our buildings, how are we maintaining access to our parks and gardens, and then what are we doing in terms of, now we've brought housing in terms of our housing improvement programme, how are we thinking about accessibility in terms of that. And then there's just a little update at the end about where we've got to with our equality, diversity and inclusion policy, and that'll hopefully be coming to Cabinet quite soon, hopefully in September, I think is the plan now, to finally get that signed off. So we've made quite a lot of progress with it. We've been out to public consultation. The response was very low, unfortunately, but we did get some, and obviously now we've brought housing and we've had to bring in all of those elements as well. So we've got a new refresh policy ready to start coming through the process. But I think what I would say is, whilst this does demonstrate that we do a lot of really good work in this area, there are clearly still things that we could do. There are some opportunities to do things differently as we move forward. So, for example, you know, we know that we're going to be probably moving away from this building at some point. So how do we make sure that we factor in accessibility so we don't have the same problems there as we do here with the council chamber, for example, where we're sitting now is not really accessible to people. So how do we make sure we factor that in? So we've done a bit of an action plan. It is by no means capturing every single thing we could possibly do, but it captures some of the things that which came out as the sort of obvious gaps as we went through. We've also developed quite a really strong working relationship recently. We've always had it, but we're building on it more with the National Star College. And they've been doing some great work with us on accessibility, in particular around some of the motorised chairs, which are bigger than sort of the standard wheelchair and tend to sometimes get a little bit forgotten about that size of a chair when you're designing things. So they're going to be doing some work with us about access to buildings, for example, and they're going to help us create some videos as well, because some of the feedback we got when we spoke to them were sometimes that nervousness to go out because they don't know where the accessible entrance is, because it's not always obvious. So if we could, do some little videos that were on our website so that they could actually see, this is how I get there. The work with the shops that we're going to do, for example, about identifying which shops are truly accessible. And so they have some kind of little sticker in the window. And then again, creating a bit of a map that we can go on our Marketing Cheltenham website that shows these are all the accessible places within Cheltenham that you can visit that are truly accessible. So lots of work going on, lots of great stuff. But I won't say any more than that. But if people have got questions or anything, happy to take them if I can answer them.
Thank you, Claire. That's really helpful. I'd just like to jump in first, if you don't mind, and then, Rich. You mentioned working with businesses and such like, and with the Cheltenham Dementia Action Alliance, where we're trying to work with the BID to raise awareness of dementia, people with businesses and shops and such like, and accessibility for dementia as well. It's interesting you mentioned getting into places, but actually a key thing is sometimes getting out of them for people with dementia. So pooling those resources, if we're both talking to the BID and we've both got accessible Gloucestershire in our sites, then that's great. So just wanted to mention that. But I think over to Councillor Pinniger.
I just wanted to say I'm really pleased to see this. I think there's a lot of great content in there, and I'm aware it's a briefing note. And the one important action near the end is revise the ED&I policy and action plan. So it's then going to lead into a strategy and a policy and actions. So we're responsible not just for council buildings, but for the town. We're the borough council. And a lot of the accessibility problems that you see around the town are should have been sorted out by law, but never were. It's been the law since the 1980s and updated in 2008. So I wondered if we're doing anything outside of our sort of just the council offices and the officers with the wider town.
So we're doing some work with the BID around the shops, for example. We're also doing some work. So one of the other things that we picked up was particularly around, so there was a comment around the Everyman, for example. They have a seat, a place where a wheelchair user can sit to watch a performance, but it's one space on the end of a row. And if you're a couple that are both wheelchair users, it means you can't sit together if you go to the theatre. So, for example, this year, one of the things we've done is we've asked them as part of their grant funding that we give them to actually consider using some of it to resolve that issue. So people can sit together. So we're doing those kind of things. There's not any active conversations about further change in places at the moment, but there have been conversations and we're keen to rectify those because that's the other thing that would be good to explore. But and there are ongoing discussions with highways as well around sort of things around paving and that kind of thing. So there's lots going on outside of just the council offices as well.
Thanks, Claire. Any other questions or comments?
And thank you, Claire. It does seem like there's a lot done, but a lot still to do. Yeah. Just specifically in terms of the Muni, because, the sale process is ongoing, is the reality in terms of the council offices that any significant investment will be in a future place rather than the current building?
I think that's a political decision about where the investment goes. I don't think I can answer that, sorry.
Nice try, Councillor Day. Okay. Well, I think you've preempted lots of questions there, Claire, and we really welcome the activities that are ongoing, and we'll really be supporting what happens next. So, any last comments?
I was just going to say, if the committee would like, we could obviously bring back an update in, even if it's in 12 months, at least it'll be an update of what's happened and where we've got to. So we're happy to do that, or whenever.
Thank you. Yes, that sounds great, Richard.
The action was for October. So there's an action saying develop a policy and some. Yeah, so I'm expecting an update maybe in October.
We can bring the policy in October and then do another update in a year from now on, all the other, because the policy is one bit, it's not all the actual doing, is it? So yeah, we can bring the policy forward then, and then bring some more information forward in a year's time on where we've got to with all the other actions.
Okay, thank you very much. And that segues very nicely into the next item on the agenda, which is a review of our work plan. Thank you very much, Claire. The review of the work plan, you can see there what we've got for each of our upcoming meetings. Just to note, though, that on the 7th of July, the Culture Board item will be moved to September. And we'll make a note that actually there isn't a meeting in October, so we'll make a note and try and fit in the EDI policy in November's meeting. See how that goes. Yeah? Okay. Right. Any other comments on the work plan? Councillor Day?
I just wondered, with the Minster Exchange item, the update on the first year of operation, I wondered if there would be any financial information included in that report, or what are we getting updated on?
I mean, it's assessing the impact against the original objectives. So I suppose that depends what the objectives were, but we can certainly discuss that at our chair's meeting, because we discuss what we're going to ask of people who are coming to our meetings. Yeah.
And I guess we could always do it as a restricted item, if that's the correct phrase, if necessary.
I think we'll have to see. We'll have to check how appropriate that is. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anything else? We don't have any other items. The date of the next meeting, as just mentioned, is the 7th of July. So I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.